Okay, Alex, nice to have another catch-up as you get ready for a Friday night fix. We'll talk more about that in a moment's time, but you still continue that hard team to beat. Didn't get the win, but didn't lose.
No, we've obviously touch wood, cracked certain areas of this game. We have done since the start of the season in terms of being hard to beat, but drawing games of football has become common lately, and we've got to turn those draws into wins. So to do that, we're going to need to get more bodies in wider areas so that we have more entries into the box. We've had a real good look this week in terms of why we're not having as many entries up the pitch, and we have identified we're lacking a player or two once we get the ball with a full backs wider or with a wide players wider to then go and combine with them to get the ball into the box. So it's a process that we're looking at every single week in terms of how we can evolve. You know, we've upped the passing rate in terms of the last couple of games. We've made more passes than any team in the league on average. So we're getting into areas now where we then need to be more cutthroat in that final third. So yeah, we're making small steps, but those small steps have got to culminate in us obviously having more opportunities.
As you just outlined there, and I think you've outlined in many interviews how hard you're striving to become that more offensive side. You've got a few goal scorers in the team. Do you think one or two have lacked a little bit of belief when they're getting in them positions that, you know, it's not going to work for them and you've got to try and instill that in them?
Yeah, I think so, Graham. I do, and if we could add that to the players that are scoring goals for us, which is obviously Courtney and Dan, then it doesn't half help. I mean, other than the top 2 or 3 teams in every league, you're either a team that spreads the goals around without having prolific goal scorers, or you're a team that's got a prolific goal scorer or two and doesn't spread the goals around. We're the latter at the minute. So on top of those two continuing to score, which we're confident they will, we need other attackers in the team, particularly attackers, to come to the party in terms of being a goal threat and chipping in with goals. Because as you've said, other than those two, I think we've only sourced goals from 3 other players. Maybe Kelvin's got one, Rod's got one, and Lachlan Brook's got one. So we need more from more players if we're obviously going to improve our goal output.
You made an interesting point. You're really honest with your interviews after the game the weekend when you said that the dressing room was subdued and quiet because of the reaction they got from the crowd. How can you deal with that for your players as you prepare now for Friday night? What are you going to try and do to get them up again?
They don't need to get up in terms of where we're at with general structure and general belief. What we do need to make sure is they don't get too down and too disappointed off the back of games where we go into them expecting to win and we don't win, and obviously the reaction from that, naturally from the crowd and understandably so, is one of disappointment because we're at home against a team below us in the league and we haven't won the game. So it's just a case of continuing to build optimism with the players. As I've said numerous times before, everything that you ask from them, they give you. Certainly in terms of the defensive side of the game and the build-up play now. But we need to be given more in terms of what happens up at the top end of the pitch. And that is the hardest area of any game of football to try and master, scoring a goal. Which is why, obviously, strikers are 10 a penny in terms of those that can contribute outside the box. But it becomes more difficult to grab those strikers that can also score the goals in the box. It's the hardest part of the game, and it's one we're working really hard towards trying to master, moving from this week into the game at Tranmere.
I know you won't use it as an excuse, but your task's been made harder in terms of scoring goals, because when you look at the players that keep going out of the team, they're that end of the pitch, aren't they?
Yeah, it's harder, but other teams have injuries, and it's something you do. You just have to cope with. That's part of being a manager, part of being a management team. You have to deal with the setbacks that you're given and come up with solutions accordingly. And I'm sure things will change, touch wood, as the season goes on in terms of us keeping players fitter for longer. And if we do have a spate of injuries, hopefully it won't affect one area of the team significantly, whereas at the minute, obviously, we're missing players that could play attacking midfield, off the front or up front, in terms of those 4 players that were not up for selection on Saturday. We're hoping that Lachlan Brook will come into contention for this week. There's better news and brighter news on that than we first thought, so that could be one that we could add back into the squad for Friday.
Well, pick up on that. I was going to come a little bit later on that, so let's carry on with that. Yeah, he missed out last week, and it looked as though it was a worry that with the injury, but as you just pointed out, he looks okay, does he? So again, fingers crossed he's a part of the squad for Friday.
Yeah, he opened up the same injury, Graham, that he had previously that he missed 4 or 5 weeks with in training on the Friday leading into the Saturday, and we thought that that could be a recurrence similar to what Chris Long experienced, so we did fear the worst, but all the signs this week so far suggest that it's not anything major, it's just an irritation rather than a recurrence. Friday, as I say, might come too early, but we're hoping that he could be in a position where he could be in the squad for Friday, so it's certainly better news on that front.
And just going back to something there, picking up on as well, you mentioned you and your managerial team are all looking at ways that it works. You work very close. That's one thing you established straight away when you took the job. They've all got a role to play, and especially when you're not just getting the wins that you want, you need input from everybody. Absolutely, we do that every week. What time is it now? 9:30. We've been in the room next to us for an hour and a half this morning, debating, coming up with resolutions and suggestions in terms of what's the best way forward in terms of playing against Tranmere, because they are a team that play in a block of 2 banks of 4 and 2 forwards that stop you playing through the middle of the pitch. So we're debating everything in terms of that game, in terms of how we approach it. And every game's different, every game's a project. I've heard plenty of managers say that they treat each individual game as a project, and you have to, because every opposition provides different systems of play, different styles of play within those systems, and even teams that play the same system as each other have different interpretations of how to utilise it. So, you've got to come up with problems to solve and riddles to try and get over in every single game. Well, they've got on a run that you're hoping is going to come towards your team very quickly, because it's 4 wins, I think, on the bounce for Tranmere, and it's a Friday night fixture. You follow football, you've been a football fan, never mind just a football player, football manager, football coach. It's traditional that Tranmere like to play on a Friday night, isn't it? Yeah, they've done it for years, haven't they? There have been some Friday night games there for ourselves and neutral games, and we used to do it, didn't we, in the 80s and early 90s. I think it was something of a tradition for us to play on a Friday night. So they asked us to agree to it or not. We had the option to agree to it, and I, without hesitation, agreed to it, because it just adds a little bit different feel and atmosphere to it, doesn't it? As you say, under the lights, they're quite vociferous as a supporter-based Tranmere, well followed, and I think it'll add a few on the gate on the Friday night as well. People obviously finish work and get straight to the pubs and then jump into the ground. So it's a challenge and an atmosphere and environment that I'm looking forward to seeing how our players respond to. Can we talk about the progress of Joel Taverner, how he's getting more minutes at first team level and where he is at the moment, because you must be pleased that 1 or 2 of those group of players that we talked about in the summer are pushing themselves for first team places. Yeah, the 2 we identified were Joel and Charlie, weren't they? And there was no way that either of those were going to be ready to play in the first 4, 5, 6 games, certainly from the start. The first year pros, and they're well ahead of the curve. Traditionally, players that come into the team for us, even like Perry NG and Tom Lowry, they were a year beyond this when they first had their integration into the team. So they're well ahead of schedule. We know how to manage them. We've obviously played a part in 70, 80, maybe even 3 figures amounts of players that have been integrated from our academy into the first team. We know when they're right. We spot the signs, and we're able to judge that, and they're getting closer and closer, those 2 boys. And Tabs in particular came on and had a good impact on Saturday, and he's certainly up for consideration in terms of the starting 11 for Friday night. Why wouldn't he be? Because he's a really good player, good technician, and he's going to allow us to control games higher up the pitch when we get the ball into those areas of the pitch where he can receive it and face up defenders. I suppose what's happened in terms of how many injuries you've got, he might have been one of those players in the back of your mind. You might be thinking, shall we send him out on loan and see how he progresses? But because of the injuries you've got, he's taken his chance, hasn't he? He's in there on merit. Yeah, I was a little bit economical with the truth with you earlier in the summer when I said that those 2 might need a loan before they come into the team. I didn't really ever believe that, but what I wanted to do was just, dampen down the expectations on those boys from externally, so that they were given time to breathe and given time to grow in the first few weeks of the season, with a view to getting them in and around the team around about now. And that's the way it's played out, because we knew where their progress was at. We knew where their progress needed to become,
once we got to the point there, we could integrate them into the team, and they've reached that now. They've had some minutes from the bench, they've had some impact from the bench, and they're under full consideration, both of those boys now, to start games of football.